Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Strife's Sanctum. And this week, and for the next month, actually, I'm going to do another kind of themed month kind of thing, much like I did with Ruby back to front. And this one is going back a good 20 years. It was one of the first shows I'd ever seen. And it was one of the first projects I'd ever seen. It was also one of the first games that I remember getting for PS2, because this was around the time that the PS2 became a thing. But as you can see, we're going to start from the beginning. I'm going to start with .hack sign, because everything builds on each other, but in an interesting way. Project .hack was a kind of multimedia project, and things like Mighty Number 9 try to do the same thing. They were trying to do something called Red Ash or whatever, make an anime plus a game out of it, that sort of thing. This isn't like a game tie-in or an anime tie-in. This is everything working together to build its own kind of world, basically. This was also going to be an MMO known as Fragment, using the PS2 quadrilogy hardware, and it might still exist. I've actually seen a YouTuber by the name of Nakatalili play it from time to time, so it's a legit thing. But as far as my purposes, and far as I know, .hack has been an anime, .hack has been a couple of games, and they've always had a good following. I don't think they were the biggest things in the world, but I know .hack sign was the thing everybody remembers. But the reason I wanted to do all four was because this was kind of one of not only my gateways into anime, this was the second or third anime I'd ever seen. I mean, I stayed up late watching Toonami one night, and this happened to be on, and Inuyasha happened to be on, and, well, I went from there. Bit by bit until now I've, just primarily I watch anime all the time. But still, you had to start somewhere, and this was one of the few that I started with. But .hack, like I said, isn't just an anime franchise. It came about because it's anime that tie into some video games that tie back to the anime in a certain extent, but they're kind of mutually exclusive, but not quite. That's why I wanted to do them all separately. Because .hack sign came first. Then about 3 to 6 months later, after this came out, they released the quadrilogy: Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine. And that will be next week's video, going on that and talking about that specifically. A few years after that, and a couple of, lesser anime, The Legend of the Twilight Bracelet. Do not watch it, it's dumb. They released what was known as .hack Roots in conjunction with a game known as .hack GU, and that was re-released as .hack GU Last Recode. So all four are going to be talked about. I couldn't really justify doing .hack without doing all of it, and including stuff from .hack Liminality, and there's some other things, a PSP game here and there, and a manga here and there. There's so much stuff that .hack has done, and it concerns the world. And this was at a time when MMOs were in their infancy. I think stuff like EverQuest and whatnot, and I don't think WoW was even out yet, but I could be wrong. But MMOs were starting to become a thing, and this is ahead of its time. This is like those video game adaptation anime things you see all the time, those isekais where a guy's trapped in a video game and whatever. Sword Art Online was the big one that happened about 5 to 10 years ago. This came first by about 15 years, so suck it. And I honestly think it's better. But it's not because it's a video game tie-in or a video game-based thing or whatever. It's because of the way it processes how it wants to do things. I talked before about Ghost in the Shell and how procedural it is, how much of a drama it is compared to an action show. This is just talking. This is characters talking. You might see some visuals, you might see some video game references and stats stuff and all that stuff. This is not a video game based show. They barely do any of that. They have references to gaming stuff, but it's mostly about what are you in this world, but also what are you outside of it. And the cool thing that Dot Hack does better than anything else is it alludes to your real life without forcing it out of people. This show in particular is all about trying to escape from one's real life in different ways through the mechanisms of the world itself, but also knowing that just by talking, just by seeing a person's face move, just by hearing the actors react or hearing the characters and whatever react to a thing as they're discussing a thing. It's 26 to 28 episodes of discussing things. They're barely doing anything. They might be riding a boat, they might be in a field, they might even get on a fight here and there. But it's not about that. It's about these characters trying to solve this little riddle that is starting to take over the world and will take over the world in part of the actual game that comes later. So it's concurrent with what's going on in the quadrilogy, but it happens before it as well. So a lot of the stuff you see in this happens in the quadrilogy or gets alluded to, and then the same thing applies with Roots and then GU. So a lot of the characters can or will show up or are at least referenced in some way, and everything that happens in Dot Hack Sign has a reference point in what ends up happening in the game. So it is important to talk about what goes on in these anime before you even do it. And then let's not even mince words. There's something known as Dot Hack Liminality, where it talks about the actual outside world, what the hell's going on while this whole virus in this game is going on, because it is a virus or whatever. But again, this is about characters more than anything else, not even like action. I said before, it's mostly about what happens to characters. So this will be not so much spoiler heavy as I have done in some shows. Not even Ghost in the Shell. I didn't do too many spoilers for that. But again, if you're not invested in these characters or what they look like or the world or the mystery that they're solving, this show isn't for you. So hopefully I do a good enough job of expressing why the world or Dot Hack or the characters involved do a good enough job to justify it, because all you're doing is listening to people talk for 20 episodes, and you might be into that sort of thing. But we'll start with the main character and where this whole plot revolves around. Tsukasa. In the English version, voiced by Brienne Seidel, who was in Xenosaga as one of the main characters, Junior. That's what I know her from mostly. And Tsukasa is this character who cannot log out from the video game. It is established early on in the first episode, so that's not really a spoiler, so don't. That's their entire character. He doesn't understand why he's there. He doesn't understand why he is able to feel pain or feel sadness or feel something. Like everybody else has like a headset, like a VR headset monitor thing and the controller, and they can do their thing. It's like half between, VR headsets and, Virtual Boy kind of thing. And remember, this was 2002, so stuff like Oculus and shit hadn't come out yet. But unlike everybody else, he can't see himself. He's inside the world. So he's this scared boy who, alluded to here and there in the episodes, has a kind of a broken home and tries to do things in the real world, but his father is always against him for some reason. And that leads to Tsukasa being this very guarded person and doesn't really like people, doesn't want to be around people. Most of the time, people have to kind of force themselves upon him, and he just kind of gets used to it. And the entire show is kind of revolving around what machinations are in play because he can't log out, and it ends up being a thing. The second main character is Lady Subaru, voiced by Kim My Guest, who was Mei-Ling in Metal Gear Solid. And Subaru is just the nice, stern... It's weird how to describe her. It's like she's very like forceful personality, but very guarded. And I always liked her the most out of any of the characters because she has a striking look, being a female, but having like, you know, classes. Think of classes in video games. A heavy axe wielder. So even though they don't fight in game, Subaru is this like strong, like looks strong and imposing and feels strong, but also has this gentleness, but is in this position of power with the Crimson Knights. And they're basically their job, player, you know, they're not administrators or whatever. They're player-based people that are just a guild, high-end guild, by the way, probably the biggest in the thing. But Subaru kind of takes the we're not administrators, don't do anything wrong, and it comes into play because Silver Knight, voiced by Douglas Rye, is always like, I don't think why Tsukasa's doing the thing. This is totally against what the Crimson Knight should do. He just goes nuts on that over and over, and it's kind of a butting heads kind of situation the more that they get involved, and Subaru ends up faltering not because of her own actions, but because of being with Tsukasa basically goes against the will of the Crimson Knights or whatever, which turns out was just some fucking made-up name from one of her friends, Krim, who was voiced by Lex Lang, who was in like Rurouni Kenshin and other stuff like that. So Krim is just this... How I describe him? Laissez-faire but powerful, just spear user. He just comes and goes at the whim of the wind, but like he imposes his like, you should be strong because this is what you want to do. This is your life. You should stand strong and it's almost like he's preaching to you, but at the same time he's got this like cowabunga dude, like a Ninja Turtle vibe to him. Like he just doesn't give a fuck. And yet he has to do these things like go on business trips and shit. So he's kind of caught in the middle because Subaru likes him and the way he does things. But Silver Knight is this higher, you know, ranking guy after Krim leaves. And Subaru has to deal with both of them having two different ways of thinking. And then what does Subaru, the player, want with this whole Tsukasa mess? So that's kind of the other main concurrent storyline going on, excuse me. But you'll have regular players getting along too. You have Mimiru, voiced by Amanda Wynn Lee, who was Rei in Evangelion. She was Yukiko Amagi in Persona 4. Mimiru in this. Mimiru is kind of just the happy-go-lucky teenager, but she's got a short temper and she just wants to beat the shit out of things because she's a heavy class. She just has a broadsword and is just like, you are mean! What the fuck are you doing? Why are you telling me what to do? And she's always like on Tsukasa's side, but is also like wise to his bullshit. But after a while, she understands why he's kind of like just this shrivelly, like, don't be around me. Like, think of the most introverted people you can think of. And she slowly kind of breaks her guard and breaks his guard so that he's not as introverted. Because she's extroverted as shit, you know, because Subaru and Tsukasa both aren't very expressive. So somebody had to take the lion's share of the energetic character, and she's got it in spades. She's joined by Bear, who is Paul Mercier. I don't remember him being in much. I'm sure he's had to be in things, but this is what I know him from mostly. He's the old guy. He's the I wouldn't call him Orin from Final Fantasy X because he's not like a gruff, but he's the old, wiser guy in the party, hanging around with Mimiru all the time and going on quests and shit. Turns out his story is he's got kind of a broken home of his own thing going on. His son is just kind of a bit of a dipshit, and they kind of allude to it a little. And Bear kind of has this thing where he wants to be Tsukasa's foster guardian kind of thing after a while, but he doesn't know how to express it because he doesn't think Tsukasa's kind of doing things the right way. So he has to stop his paternal instincts and stop being a bit of a dick sometimes, because Mimiru and Tsukasa aren't 45 years old, you know. God, that's going to feel weird when I get 45. But he's also joined by BT. So Donna Rollins, BT, same class as Tsukasa, Wave Master, so Mage. We'll go into the classes and shit when we actually go over the game. It's not really all that important in the actual anime, so I'm kind of glossing over it. But BT is a schemer. She's manipulative. She's just a scheming sack of shit, but she has her reasons. She's kind of like into people, but she's also trying to figure out what she wants out of the world, because she's kind of using it as her own escape from kind of being a lonely older woman. So she's got the hots for Bear, she's got the hots for Krim, and she deals with other people, but it's like very subtle until like a few episodes in, and she's just kind of like into them, but they're not really into her. So it's strange how they keep focusing on it, but at the same time, her main role in the party is to just be kind of that unnerved, like, I'm working everybody, but I'm also working with them, but I'm not working with them. Not antagonistic, but whatever. And her and Mimiru, or she and Mimiru, don't get along at all, because Mimiru is a bit of an idiot, and BT is anything but. She doesn't do anything unless she has to, or unless Bear or Krim tells her to do it. But she is like an info dump, and she kind of works. So those three characters kind of work together, while Tsukasa and Subaru kind of like forge a closer bond. Like Tsukasa and Mimiru sort of get together, but not really, more as friends. It's Tsukasa and Subaru that sort of like get the lion's share of the work. And as far as antagonists go, well, this show is notable for Sora, voiced by Dave Wittenberg, who was Teddy in Persona 4. Oh boy! I had to mention Teddy. I feel great. But anyway, Sora is a goof. He's like the most intense, like super powered guy in existence, like the assassin type. But the way he processes information is childlike. The way he acts, and I know why. Shut up, I know why. Don't ask me on that. I'm not spoiling it. But Sora acts like a bit of a nerd. He just whenever he joins in, he goes boing, 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 boing. And he's just like, give me your member address, please. And just all these little things. And he's like, like all these little sound effects. And Wittenberg does a great job, because he's not like the Teddy, like screaming and bawling over the place. He's the scheming, just psychopathic kind of guy, but with that weird charm. But nobody likes him, because why would you like somebody like that, who's a bit of a nerd and a joke and just bounces everywhere, and then, well, obviously just stabs you just because he does it. He's what's known as a player killer, because that's always fun. You've probably seen those people on a fucking website or two. He is the definition of an internet troll and a player killer. You know, that's what player killers are. They are trolls. And he is the trolliest of the trolls. And he's there to figure out what the fuck is up with everybody going over Tsukasa's nutball. Because Tsukasa is super important, and we'll go over why in a minute. But the reason Tsukasa is important has to revolve around the main antagonist, Morgana Mode Gone, voiced by Valerie Aram. And she's done countless smaller roles here and there. She doesn't have one that's like super specific. I would say, for my purposes, like the teacher from Persona 3, that's the one I know her most from, but again, it's smaller roles, stuff like that. But Morgana Mode Gone is this AI that was created in this world, and that's a good enough place to start. So why is Tsukasa important, and why do Sora, Subaru, Mimiru, all these people revolve around Tsukasa? Well, it's because Morgana has a plan as an AI to keep something else intact, but she needs Tsukasa to do it. And it's the mystery of the show is why Morgana would do a thing like that. And it revolves around something known as Aura. Aura is another AI, and she's in the form of a girl. So Morgana is kind of this omnipotent, unseen, invisible thing that just speaks. Aura is the physical, like, as far as a game would go, just this girl with white hair. And apparently she is supposed to be born, but for whatever reason, Tsukasa sees her over this bed and she's not waking up. And Morgana is kind of getting on Tsukasa and saying, hey, I will give you this power, just stay with me. So why is that happening? Why is this such a big deal? Well, Tsukasa can't log out. That raises red flags. Morgana also gives Tsukasa the ability to kind of warp in and out of zones without having to gate out, which is this like gate in the middle of a town. He's the only one who can do it, so that's already raising red flags. And then a few episodes in, he uses what is known as a guardian, and this big dumbbell looking thing that can basically fuck with a person's data or cause a coma. You know, so it's obvious why anyone would want to know what the hell's going on, because they hear of this rumor known as the Key of the Twilight. And you've seen that whole MacGuffin where it's the most amazing item that can happen to do anything you want. You know, it's basically a free wish. Does it exist? Is it a thing? Do we know it's a thing? Certain people don't believe it. Some people want to believe it because they see this character who has all these big red flags and is like, Tsukasa doesn't know what the hell's going on. It's not like amnesia, but it's more like well, I gave that one away. Okay, fine, I gave it away. She's a girl. Great. I said I wasn't going to spoil, but for whatever, she's a girl. So yes, hooray, Tsukasa is stuck dealing with this situation, and he doesn't know what's going on, and all this problem, she can't figure out what the hell's going on. And again, it's like, what does Tsukasa have to do? What can she do with the help of this person? It turns out Subaru is the one that helps the most, but it's a lot about escapism and like finding a place to belong. Morgana's giving Tsukasa one thing, Bear's offering another thing, Mimiru's offering friendship, Subaru's offering love, you know, different ways of doing it. And then everybody else is involved in certain aspects of it. So Tsukasa has to kind of weigh well, I don't want to be around you. You're annoying. Stop it. Because of her bad upbringing. Because, like, they don't allude to it, but from what I remember, is she's been smacked around by her dad a few times because she wanted to have a puppy or a dog or care for a dog. And it was really, they do those kinds of things because this was more of a serious show, and Tsukasa's kind of stuck in this like, well, this motherly figure is my way out of here, and she's giving me all this attention. But then all the other main characters are like, no, this is bullshit. This is not real. Morgana is just using you, or they don't even know Morgana exists. They just know Tsukasa doesn't really know a thing and can't really do a thing for themselves. They just kind of learn as they go. And that's part of the interesting thing with the show, even though I was dumb and spoiled it a little bit. I'll leave it there. I mean, that was fun. But, you know, as far as spoilers reviews go, whatever, I'll just put the tag up and it won't be a big deal. But I'm sure you would have seen it. But as far as all this weird machinations, this show is all about who is Tsukasa. Gave it away, sort of. Why is it important? Didn't give it away. Hooray for me. But why is everybody drawn to them? And this is something that happens with Roots, because I'm watching Roots as well. They're drawn to their main characters. It's like this inescapable thing. Like there's something about them. Why is Morgana going to so much trouble to help Tsukasa? Why are Mimiru and Bear, BT, and others so drawn into this thing because they're just regular players living their lives. They're friends to each other, but this random person who can't log out, why do you care so much? And it goes about it in this really sophisticated, slow way, a very dramatic way. And the aesthetics are what really draw you into the show. It's a standard MMO, standard old school like Diablo, RuneScape, EverQuest, WoW, just those worlds. There's nothing amazing about it. It's got some backlog and backstory. Like, this guy created this world based on this book and whatever, and they have like their own story. None of that comes across. It's just window dressing to this world. So suffice it to say, the world itself it's an MMO. Nothing special. It's got some lines and some character drama and art looking thing. The character designs draw you in, though. Not so much the world designs. And the same thing holds true in the actual video games. As I stated before, the video game part is kind of non-existent. You have character classes, you have leveling up, you have all this shit, but it doesn't really do anything. It's not played for, oh, I gotta get stronger because there's major enemies coming up. It's like, I'm going stronger because I'm alone and I need to fight this thing and get this thing because it's like 1 or 2 episodes about that. It's about these people going through these weird things, trying to find this supposed key of the Twilight, and then answering the issue of why is this girl/boy stuck in this basic limbo? She can't log out. Why is that? And then what is the connection with this girl that is floating in this bed somewhere? It's a mystery. And what really works to the show's advantage is that they do show off the real life sections, but they don't obsess over it. They don't show you like out of character stuff. Like, I think Sword Art Online a few times would go way too far into, oh my god, I have real life and we're in real life now, we're not stuck in the video game. This would have this very bright, very vibrant world and character art. The characters are striking to look at, and this was 20 years ago, and it still looked amazing and still holds up. When they want to show the real life stuff, which is about 5 or 10 times during the whole 20 episodes, it's like very short spurts because it's all staticky. It'd be all monochrome and static everywhere. You might get to hear something, you might hear a sound effect, you might hear a person speaking here and there, but the real life is alluded to and shown, but it doesn't really tell you a lot. It shows you what it needs to show and to inform what's going on in the world. They keep the action like 98% in the game without really forcing the game part. And it's really good because, again, I don't know every video game video game isekai kind of thing. But stuff like Shield Hero, they'd focus on stats and leveling up and stuff like that. Sword Art Online would be all about living in this fantasy game and working in a guild or whatever. This is about characters just talking to each other. They might go to a different dungeon or a different place in the world here and there, but they're always talking to each other. At most, you have a quest line in an episode, but it's all going back to those 2 or 3 main story arcs and mysteries that surround the show. If it's in that kind of mode where Dot Hack succeeds, and Roots does the same thing, just a slightly different variation on it. Really what the show is, and it could have been a budget choice, it could have been, I don't think they would have chosen it this way. I don't think any other show that B-Train ever made, Studio B-Train, focused so heavily on faces. To such an extent that they ignore action almost entirely, and you're told the story through a person's face and their words. You're just seeing their lips move and change. Like, you see a still image of them for like 20 seconds, and then all of a sudden their eyebrows furrow, or they lift their lip, or they gasp or something. That's the show. And yet it's absorbing. It's crazy absorbing how much just subtle things. And I don't think I've ever seen a show like this that doesn't really do anything, and yet you're wrapped around its finger. And it also has to do with the soundtrack. Yuki Kajiura is one of the higher end named anime/video game composers for a reason. She'd worked with Studio B-Train for quite a bit of shows like Noir and other things. Murder Princess, was it Murder Princess or Corpse Princess? I think it was Murder Princess. It was a short 6-episode show, but she was on it. She's done video games like Xenosaga 2 and 3, and it's a very distinctive, like, techno-y, but also like subdued, like almost a horror techno kind of thing. But it's very subtle and soft. And you know it when you hear it. You know when you hear her sing. You know when you hear her style of music, because it is very distinct, even by anime soundtrack standards. It is its own thing. Dot Hack is its own thing. And again, I don't know if this is everybody's thing. Because when you're focusing on a mystery, and you're focusing so heavily on a character's reaction to what is going on in this episode, really, from 2 to 3 episodes, there's not a whole lot going on. But you can see it sort of build. And while I think that's a great thing, I also think for somebody who's never seen it before, or maybe not be into that sort of thing, or expecting some action, or expecting Dot Hack, it's a video game thing, oh, it's so great. No, there's no action involved. There is absolutely none. You might see a magic spell or some fights 5% of the time, but that other 95% of the show is faces. People's bodies sitting on a bench somewhere, standing around in a field. But it's so absorbing. But it is very slow. It is very deliberate, even more so than Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell is very episodic and deliberate. I'd say this rivals it as far as just not doing a thing, but also letting a thing breathe. I don't know what you would even call this other than just dramatic. It has its own thing, and it is reveling in its own thing. And the villain's motives don't even show up until way late. You don't even know why. You can suspect, but without the context of the video game, you don't even really know, well, what is Morgana doing and why is it doing? They don't allude to it till very late. That is one of the mysteries that I will not spoil, even by accident. Derp. It's one of those things where as the things start to fit together and the characters start to change and their allegiances start to form and change and splinter off into these things, you still don't know what the villain's trying to do until they have to. But at the same time, you know it's a prelude to a video game, so you know that they finished up Dot Hack as well as they could. The music and the characters are what sell it. The faces, the actions, the words that they use all tie with the music and the visuals, which I still think hold up surprisingly well for something 20 years ago. And then, anime's changed quite a bit, but I'd say it hasn't changed as drastically 20 years from now as, say, the 90s look. This is definitely that early 2000s where things started to be very computerized and CG, and you can definitely tell. But it is absorbing. And that is a trend. That is a word that I've used to describe Dot Hack, and I probably will use over and over. What does Dot Hack sign mean to the whole grand scheme of things? It introduces the concept. It shows you characters inside a video game and how they react to people in a situation as dire as, I'm stuck in a video game, what do I do? But I'm also this introverted person because of a bad home life. and then you have these villains that are very subdued, but also unique in their own right. So Dot Hack Sign bleeds into the quadrilogy, but it stands alone on its own. And I'm curious when I get through Dot Hack Roots, which I'm rewatching right now, does that hold up on its own? Because I've always felt that Dot Hack Sign of any of these properties is the strongest. I like the games, but they're games, and they have their own foibles that can sink a video game, and they sort of do. As much as I like GU, I like Dot Hack Sign more because it started it. It has its own thing, and you can hear it in my voice. I'm as deliberate as the show is, and it's not exciting in the same way that an action show excites you. It excites you on a weird, visceral, kind of unnerving level because of the way that the mystery unfolds. And it's not even like a mystery for the sake of a mystery. It's these 5 to 10 characters all revolving around these 3 to 4 plot points while still trying to do little things in their lives, like play a video game. How do they interact with it? How do they consolidate, being in this video game as real life people with a job, and how do they reference that and deal with the goings on of this, oh my god, this person is stuck in this video game. How do we break them out of it? That is absorbing, and to me is the crux of the show. It is very serious too. And when you go into it, it has its levity, but much like Ghost in the Shell, it is meant to be taken seriously. Unlike Legend of the Twilight Bracelet, which is not at all. It is stupid comedy for the sake of stupid. This is very serious. I think a lot of adults can get into this show, like even if you've been like watching isekai for years and maybe have heard of it but never seen it. As somebody who's seen it 5 to 10 times, I can tell you even now it holds up as well as it always did. And I keep coming back to it because I want something like this. And it informs everything that I played with later on. So like I said, Dot Hack Sign is that starting point, because next week we get into what happens with Morgana, which I will talk about in the actual game bit. I won't talk about it now because I already dumped a spoiler like an idiot, but I will save that for next week as a sort of cliffhanger. What happens at the end of Dot Hack Sign is exactly what happens at the beginning of Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine, the first attempt at a video game. The week after that, we'll talk about Dot Hack Roots and the World R2, or Revision 2, and then finally Dot Hack GU. And I think it was important for me to do all 4 of these back to back because they all feed off each other in different ways. If I can get a chance to watch the Liminality stuff to get a better understanding of the Outward stuff, I would say with the first set of games, you definitely want to have knowledge of Liminality because it comes included, which was a neat effect because all 4 of those games were included with an anime side material, which was cool. Those were awesome games, by the way, but I will get into that next week. But I hope you guys enjoyed the sort of spoiler showing of Dot Hack Sign. And if you're interested in Dot Hack, I recommend it. It's mostly on Amazon Prime. I actually had to fish out an old set of DVDs for this, but it is available in different places. But Dot Hack Sign is very rare. But it was one of those things that I really liked growing up, and it still holds up. So if you've never seen it, I would definitely suggest it. If you have seen it and want to talk more about it, please leave a comment or just like, share, and subscribe. But that'll do it for me, Citizen Strife, signing off.